So after knight e4, white, of course, the most natural is taking on e7, queen takes e7, and here we could look at several options that white could employ trying to find an advantage. The most natural was c takes d5, knight takes c3, bc3, e d5, and queen b3. So the idea is quite simple. White is attacking d5 pawn, preparing c4, and thus trying to create an advantage in the center versus, black's advantage on the queen side. But of course, the central pawns are giving white slight edge because it could help them to develop the pieces and eventually have initiative both in the center or on the queen side, where the black's pawns could be potentially subject to an attack. Black always played rook d8, and after c4 there were many games played in the beginning of 20th century where white enjoyed certain initiative, but later on it was found that it was not as simple, and one of the key games that changed the perception of this position was played in fact in 1889 in the semi-final match between Anatoly Karpov and Artur Yusupov. And Artur Yusupov, in fact, gave a second burst to this line. He played this opening against Anatoly Karpov in their semi-final match. He played it 4 times, and he, except losing game 8, which was the deciding game of the match, he got very good positions. He equalized in game 2, he was better in game 4, and he was winning game 6. Eventually that was a game 6, where he played the line with dc4, bishop takes c4, knight c6, and then we just will look at this game later. And after queen c3, bishop g4, castle, he took on f3, and it's happened that a white strong position in the center and bishop are not giving an advantage because of the exposed position of white king in this line. Later there were some attempts for white to gain an advantage by playing bishop e2 here, but black could easily equalize, and one of the latest examples is game from famous man versus machine match Deep Fritz played Vladimir Kramnik in Bahrain in 2002, and after b6 and putting bishop on b7 and eventually releasing the c7, c5, Kramnik equalized the game. He lost eventually due to a very bad blunder, but it had nothing to do with the opening. So we have to add that Kramnik also made efforts to revive Lasker's defense, and so far his efforts were successful, and no one has a clear advice how to break through black's defense in this position. So Lasker's idea is very much alive, and there were a number of other ideas, starting with queen c2, for instance, knight takes c3, queen takes c3, but then black has options either to play c6 here, or even taking on c4, and then again playing b6. And you can see all the ideas, they're reduced to solving the key problem of the queen's gambit. So to dealing with bishop c8. Also, just don't forget about that. Dealing with bishop c8 problem, and if you try to fianchetto to it, just to play to put it on a diagonal, you have to remember that then suddenly you have another problem, which is pawn on c7, because it could be potentially weak. White could use c file attacking this pawn, because if it goes on c6, then then your bishop on b7 will be very passive. So in fact, after b6, black, the practice showed us that black could simply play bishop b7, and then rook c8, and then white couldn't stop c5. So there will be a number of games attached that could demonstrate this point. Then one of the most dangerous lines was rook c1, and after c6, bishop d3, knight takes c3, rook takes c3, dc4, bishop c4, knight d7, castle. That's here how Karpov beat Yusupov in a brilliant game. After e5, he played rook a1. He played bishop b3, and another interesting transposition. We'll look later at the system named after José Capablanca, which was his way of exchanging the pieces and solving the problem. But this system did not have intermediate move h7, h6, attacking bishop on g5 and forcing it to go on h4. So that's why Capablanca's system will reach this position with pawn on h7. And in fact, this weakness, potential weakness on g6, forced black to play very accurately, and that's one of the problems that led to Yusupov's disaster in that game. And that's why, for instance, that's why black moved to playing b6 and then trying to play bishop b7 and c5, for instance, bishop d3, c5. And that's also one of the positions that played extensively. I played against Kramnik, myself, with black in Las Palmas in 1996. Karpov played it against Yusupov, won the game, but Yusupov was equalizing. And eventually there was a game played between Gelfand and Kramnik, where Kramnik found new ideas with black to make sure that this position could be defended well. So there are a number of options for white in this position: Rook c1, Queen c2, and c takes d5. I would probably promote Rook c1 as one of the most popular and aggressive options for white. I could always point you at the game that I played in 1984 against Vasily Smyslov in the final candidate match, where I also played Rook c1, and we reached this position to c5, and I could equalize quite easily and drawing the game. That was also game 6 in our match. So looking at all these games, you could probably get some ideas how black are going to resolve the problems of the classical Queen's Gambit. And it's always interesting to see how the great players made this comeback. You have Emmanuel Lasker and his followers in the first 10-15 years of the 20th century. Then you have Artur Yusupov in 80s, and to some extent, you can add my own games, but not as I didn't use this opening as consistently as Artur Yusupov. And now we have to look at Vladimir Kramnik, who is employing this classical defense with great success, equalizing easily. So the Queen's Gambit, Lasker's defense, is still as popular as before because it proves that black has enough defensive resources.